Hey everyone, I'm excited today to have someone on my channel who over the past 12 months has become a really good friend. But before we get into that, Steven, could you just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself?
So my name is Steven Doyle. I am living in Dublin. I'm originally from Dublin, and I'm living in Dublin. But I created back in 2019. I created a ongoing portraiture documentary, photographic exhibition. Sorry, photographic. Sorry, I go back. And I'll tell you, a photographic, ongoing documentary, portraiture documentary, photographic portraiture documentary, about people who live with HIV,
Yeah.
which I hope to put it into production into an exhibition and a book, but that's later down the line. Um,
So
and
what do you do for a living?
I'm a registered nurse.
Okay.
I'm a registered nurse, and I manage a clinic in the city centre in Inclusion Health, where people from migrant backgrounds, people with dependency issues, addiction problems, homelessness, people who are basically on the margins of society, who don't have we have a thing here called a medical card where people get free medical help from the state.
Yeah.
So people who don't have medical cards, they come to us and we provide them with GP services, and then whatever medical problems they come to us with, well, if they need hospital appointments, we will refer them into mainstream healthcare.
So
And then
do you get many people that are coming to you with HIV as well?
we would have services where we do screening, and then we would have some people who would um, be diagnosed, yes, with HIV, and people who would have come from different parts of the world, um, and they would have been living with HIV, but they may not have access to medications. So when they come to us, they might be already involved in with a hospital, or
Yeah.
they may not be. Recently, I had a young girl who was from a part of Africa. She was 21, and she was um, diagnosed with HIV when she was 10, and she came to Ireland about a year ago, and she was linked in with a hospital, but she was given medications, her ARV medications, but she wasn't taking them because where she was staying in her direct provision, we have the places where they stay is like hostels or direct provision centers, and she was in this room in this direct provision center, and she confided in one of the girls in her room, and the girl basically outed her, and said that she's got just really horrible things, and she then stopped taking her medication. And one of the GPs said, Stephen, could you? I did a lunchtime learning um, with the GPs and the nursing staff, and some people from the documentary. Dr. Laura Waters, who is a HIV consultant in London, and she came on, and she basically she's a doctor and HIV consultant, but also she advocates very strongly for her patients.
Yeah.
And she came on, and she basically talked about what she does, and um so I basically talked to this girl anyway. One of the doctors after the learning session asked me to speak to this girl. So I contacted her and asked her to come in and speak to me. And I told her that, well, I said, I found out that you've been stigmatized, and things have been hard for you. And I said, look, I want to talk to you about like you going back on your medication, adherence to medication. And she's like, she didn't really, she came in and she just didn't want to know. And I said, do you know what U equals U is? And she says, no. And I says, you've never heard of U equals U? She's like, no. So I showed her a video about U equals U. And it was literally like a light bulb that just went on in her head. And her eyes widened. And she was like, and looking back at me in the screen. You know, it was just, it just, things just changed for her there and then. Um, and we start getting results back from the clinics, and I told her that her viral load had gone from a higher amount to a very low amount, and she's now, to cut a long story, so she's now undetectable.
Brilliant.
But apart from, and how I got involved in nursing, when I was 20, when I was 18, I seen a program called Challenge Annika
I
on
remember that.
BBC.
I remember that.
And Annika Rice, thank you, Annika Rice, if you hear this. She went to Romania to furbish an orphanage, to refurbish an orphanage for kids who are living there. And I think there was just the images were, that flashed on the screen were very, very harrowing, and just kids, um, you know, two or three to a cot, and you know the stench of excrement and urine
Sorry,
and
sorry to
were,
interrupt. So is this how
yeah.
you got? Is this how you got into the activism? Is by seeing this video?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that way I was 18, and then when I turned 23, I decided to volunteer. So I went to Romania for 3 months. I went to a hospital in Bucharest for 3 months to look after kids who were living with HIV and AIDS.
Yeah.
Back in the 90s, we didn't have all of our kids. Um, they had, they all had, like, they were on the cusp of AIDS, full blown AIDS. That's
Mm.
the term that they used back then. It's, I know we say advanced HIV now, but um,
So
yeah.
why were they in the orphanages? Is their parents had given them up because they've
So
got HIV?
these kids were from newborn up to the ages of maybe 13, 14, and we had 3 floors. We had a ground floor. I hope I don't cry. And a fourth floor and a second floor. So the ground floor was the it was the ICU, the intensive care unit. And when a kid, I soon learned that when a kid went from the first or the second floor to the ground floor, they would never come back. That was
Right.
their resting place. First floor was for kids who were had kind of autism spectrum disorder, special needs, um, and then the second floor were just kids who were very active and everyday kids, and they were all kind of full of energy and all different personalities, but they were all with different ages. And when I went in first, I'd seen kids with swollen stomachs, very thin arms and legs, and very dry skin. And um, yeah, we just got to work straight away and start working with them. Um, so I was there for 3 months, and the first 3 months I seen really, it was really hard. I was very emotional. And even now, like, I was very emotional, not in front of the kids, but when I'd walk away, like, and I'd go to the room I was staying in the villa. I was like, I was just really upset.
Yeah.
Um, because I'd never seen kids like this before. And the suffering that they had, and I
And what
wanted
what
to know
what
more.
what year was this? What year was this around?
1993.
So, but at that point, there was no real effective treatments, or
No.
it was
no.
still a death sentence, HIV, at that point in time.
And everybody, well, the staff were like, they were like, they would be like, they would they the less human contact they had with them. Not all of the staff. There were some brilliant people there. The doctors were absolutely amazing. The nurses were absolutely amazing. But some of the care staff were like, you know, some of them were good, but others were like, um, I seen one of them beat one of the kids one day because he had a hose that was connected to a tap, and he was like this with the hose, and he wet all the ceiling, and he had an infected eardrum, and it was oozing all the time. Um, and this woman came in and grabbed him by the ear and kind of slapped him. Like he was only 6 years old. And I was like, "What are you doing?" I went crazy. Like, I'm like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "That child has AIDS." I'm like, "What are you doing?" And I just couldn't. It was just, I had no words. I was just like, I had to just protect the child.
Mm.
And eventually I had to say something to the doctor, and then she was removed from the floors.
So how long were you in Romania
So that
for?
was my first 3 months I was there. Then after the 3 months, I came home and I was very. I'd seen a lot of death in those 3 months, and I had left a child. I had left a child, who I got very very close to. His name was Alex, and oh, I got he was wasting away, like, and he was lying on his bed. They were like these thin, wiry kind of steel beds with like, um the mattresses were horrible and stuff. But then we got new mattresses and new beds for them. But yeah, they basically had to kind of peel me away from this child because I just didn't want to leave him. And then, but after 3 months of coming back home, he had died, and I I had a dream that he was. I had a dream, and he was like, I was crying in my dream, and Alex had blonde hair and big massive blue eyes. He was absolutely gorgeous, and he was 7 years of age, and I was sitting and I was crying. I remember it in the dream very, very clearly. And he was sitting beside me and I was crying. Not like, like just the tears were coming from my eyes. And I could feel his hand wipe my tear like this, and he said, "Stephen, no plunge." And that means like, plunge means to cry, so don't cry. So it kind of gave me a bit of a kind of a kick to start to get, because I was depressed when I got back,
Mm. Yeah.
and um I was lying around the house and I was just really really down, and with that dream it was kind of like to push me back. So I got up off my arse and started going around and asking people for money, and I raised money, and I got back to Romania within 6 weeks. And then when I was back there, I remember I arrived in Bucharest. And we at the back entrance of the hospital there was like a steel gate, a metal gate, and I jumped over. And the kids, it was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and the kids were in the playground, and they see me jump over, and all of them start running to me. Um, but I just missed them so much, and I was back there, and then I started working with the hospital, and the doctors had said, "Yeah, you can come back anytime. You were really good with the kids." And um, I came back, and I worked there for 10 years.
Wow.
And then I after 7 years of being there, I also I did my nurse training in Bucharest. But when I went back after the 6 weeks of being back home, I was in the play school. It was like we had like this playroom, and it was like a classroom, and it was like it was like a big room, and the kids were singing and others were drawing and stuff like that. And this little boy came over to me, and he put his arms around my leg. He was 5. His name was Niku, and he said, "Tu és tatal meu," and that translates to like you're my daddy, you're my dad. And I was like, yeah, I'm everyone's dad. I'm everyone, I just started laughing, and I said, of course. And but from that day onwards, that child never left me. He stuck to me like everywhere I went. He was just like glued to me.
Mm.
And then and I never wanted to kind of single a child out and kind of give one, you know what I mean, more kind of attention or more love or affection than any other child, because
Yeah.
you can't give to one and not give to the other. You know what I mean?
No. No.
So, but he was just like day shift, night shift. Like he'd want to be there. He'd want, like if I was taking a picture with the children, he'd want to be in every picture. Um. So eventually, I I became kind of like I say it, I adopted him. I was like his surrogate father, you know.
Yeah.
I didn't go through the whole process of the legal process of adoption, because we couldn't adopt in Romania back then. You couldn't adopt children who had AIDS.
Mm.
So the doctor said to me, "He's yours," because I would take the kids out with one of the carers, and we take them to the cinema, we take them to for pizza, we take them into the city centre, because they were stuck in the hospital day in day out. And I was like, I had this money and people were giving me donations, and I was like, we got to do something with these kids. We used to take them to the mountains and everything. So yeah,
What
like
what 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 year would you say this was? Because we've skipped
so
forward a bit now. So
so this was 1993 right up to 2003. So I was involved with those kids.
you met Nico in 2003.
Yeah, and he was
Yeah.
born in he was born 5 years before that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I watched him grow. He lived in the hospital, but when he became like 12, t- 12, 13, he would spend weekends um over with me. And back then, when I was married, um I was married to a Romanian woman, and he would spend weekends in our apartment. He'd want to come out for the weekend and stuff. And then one of the doctors said, "Stephen, he's yours. Like, you might as well take him home with you, because no one wants him, and like his parents don't want to get involved." So every time I like I would never talk. Nico would always say, I'm. My parents don't want me, or my father doesn't want me. He always felt discarded, like he was like a piece of junk.
That is that because he had HIV, or his parents just didn't want.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
He. I know it's not important how a person contracts HIV, but he had contracted HIV from what I've understood. Um, he contracted from a childhood vaccine.
Right.
And HIV kind of reared its head when he was like 4.5 years of age, and they thought he had hepatitis, and then he was put into the hepatitis unit in the hospital, and then they had found out then that it was HIV. So he had hepatitis as well as HIV, and then he was transferred to our
So
unit.
did all of the children in the orphanage? Is that how they all contracted HIV, or were they born with it? Or
So they were in a hospital and not an orphanage.
oh right, okay.
Um, yeah,
It's an
that's
orphanage.
okay. That's okay. Some of the kids, they would have contracted it from, some of the kids were from families, some of the kids were had come from orphanages, and the legend is, um, so when Ceausescu, the dictator, the president, um, was ruling the country during the communist regime, they had exported the Romania's kind of resources because the country was in debt, and they sent off the country's resources at the people's expense, and people were queuing for bread queue other days for milk, sugar, and so on. And this was happening, and this is very evident in Bucharest now, and even when I was there. And everyone I spoke to, they used to say Timpul Ceausescu was just like Ceausescu's time. Some would say it was horrible, other people would say it was the best thing that ever happened to the country. So there was mixed views, but a lot of people would say it was a horrible time. And um, he had forced people to he and his government had forced people to married couples to have 5 children because he wanted to overpopulate the country, and the people couldn't afford to feed their kids, so they put the kids into orphanages. Like you would have a kid with a cleft palate, or a
Yeah,
kid with like a little stigmatization of their eye, or like the eye will be turned in or turned out, and you'd see kids like this in orphanages, and they were like, or maybe somebody who would be a child with maybe with autism spectrum disorder, and they were just kids who didn't, and these kids just they didn't have they back then they didn't have the resources, the professionals to actually manage these kind of conditions. So a lot of the nurses there would be given antibiotics with maybe 1 or 2 glass syringes. And what had happened was, so the kids were malnourished, and this broke out, and they got blood donations from sailors that were coming into Constanza through the Black Sea, and the blood donations were given, and I think the blood was unscreened, and these donations were then blood donations were given to children to invigorate their systems there, and that's how HIV had kind of spread in Romania,
wow.
because Ceausescu had said that when AIDS or HIV broke into the world and the world knew about it, Ceausescu had said that his country was HIV free. But then all these blood donations were given out, and then nurses were using syringes, because back then we didn't have one single use syringes.
Yeah.
I even remember that. And then it started. Then the one use of syringes started coming out. Excuse me. So yeah, that happened, and then when I was there, doctors were saying that half of the population, the pediatric population in Europe with HIV, were in Romania because
Mhm.
there were so many cases. Like we were seeing like up to 100, 200 kids and outpatients on a daily basis,
Wow.
and back then we didn't have ARVs, like, so the doctors, oh my God, like there's one of the doctors, he's now passed away, Dr. Dan. I mean, he was an incredible man. But all the doctors I've worked with there, they were incredible professionals, and they worked with the basic kind of antibiotics and medications that was available to keep those kids alive.
So there
Um,
was medications at that point
no
that
ARVs,
no, but what medications was it that they were giving the kids to
like
keep them alive?
antibiotics, like creams, steroids, like fluids and stuff like that, like basic things that we would use in medicine. You know, but the
So was it
ARVs,
was it was it was it still for them? Was HIV, what I'm trying to get at, was HIV still for them at that point a death sentence still?
yeah,
Right. Okay.
yeah.
And what
Like
year
we
was this?
were,
What year
we,
was this?
this was it was the 90s. The ARV medications came out around 1996, and Romania had said, um, the government had said that, and please don't get me wrong, I am not trying to, I love Romania. I love living there. Um, but what was in the government back then, and what was said, and all what was talked about around HIV, um, and AIDS, it was like what they'd say when ARVs came out. When we all learned about ARVs, it was, and back then we didn't have the internet and stuff. And we were at a meeting, and what was said was, if these kids are all gonna die anyway, so why should we get into, this massive debt with all these pharmaceutical companies if all these kids are going to die? So, but we were like, well, they're children. What about the right to life, the dignity, and so on? So, there was a lot of uproar, but then they gave in, and they the ARVs came available, and even during, if we go back to even COVID times, there was like a shortage of ARVs in the hospitals, and people were going without medications. And the kids that I looked after back then, some of them were ringing me up, and they're in their late 20s, 30s, and they'd say, Stephen, you're a nurse in Dublin, can you get me this medication, can you get me that medication, from your doctors here? And I can't just walk into a hospital and say, I've got some kids in Romania, can you give me some ARVs for them? It doesn't work like that.
No.
Um, but yeah, there's still kind of crises like that as well. But
So when did you leave Romania for the last time then? What year was
I
that?
left I left in October 2003,
Right.
um, and then went back. Then I've been back like several times.
Did going back to Nico, did he come back to Ireland with you?
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, and then he was back he was back in Romania, and he had a daughter.
When did he go back to
He
Romania?
went back, and he trained as a he wanted to he trained as healthcare assistant, and he was working with he was caring for kids that he had basically grew up with in the hospital, the
Oh
kids with the
wow.
special needs.
Yeah.
So, because when he said I had become a nurse, and I had trained in the wards and the hospital and the unit where um he had grown up, he basically, it was like copying me. Not, I won't say copying me, but he wanted to be like me, and he wanted to become a healthcare assistant, and became a healthcare assistant, and then he met a girl, and they fell in love and had a child. Um, but he then suffered a lot of stigma from his own kind of people, his own
Mm.
community, his own
Yeah.
HIV community.
Yeah.
Um, and um, so he had a friend that he grew up with. Um, his friend he was always a big boy, and his name was Alex as well. And Alex stopped taking his meds
Why did he do that?
because you have to understand, Peter. These kids were given these medications that, like, they were given like big tablets like this at like 7, 8 years of age, and they might have to take maybe 10 tablets a day.
Yeah.
You know, and children like, and sometimes we would have liquids, sometimes we didn't have liquids. Sometimes the liquid wasn't there, the solutions, and um, you know, they would have big tablets, big horse tablets, and they'd have to take these 3 times a day. And I think over the years, some of the kids got tired of it. Like there was a time where doctors would say, like, okay, you can have a break for maybe not for a week or so from your
Yeah.
medications. Um, and they were like, oh, I'm free for these meds, you know, and so on. But other time, like Nico was he used to hate taking meds. Like when he came over to me one year and I said, look, if you're coming here, I said from the hospital, you need to bring all your medications and bring every scrap of your medical note with you because I need to have everything here. So Alex stopped taking the meds anyway, and Alex got really sick, and he went downhill. He deteriorated very very fast, and Nico watched him, and Nico was beside him, at his bedside, and then years later, a few years later,
So did his
Nico,
friend pass away? Did his friend
yeah,
pass away? Right. Okay.
yeah, 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 and he
Right.
was on the phone to me, and he was like, I can't believe he's like he would be telling me things about Alex. He's gone to nothing. He's like a skeleton, and I'm like, I'm so sorry. And you know, I was kind of like, you know, this is all I could say to him was I'm so sorry. And I'd be crying with him over the phone. And yeah, it's just really really hard. Um, and then I was on a night duty in 2003. Sorry, 2000, not 2003. 2015. It was November 2015. I remember it was a Wednesday, and at 3:30 in the afternoon I was in bed because I was on nights that night as well,
Hmm.
and I got a call, and it was Nico, and I said, "What's up?" And he was like, "How?" He was like, "Chiffash Tata." He was like, "How are you?" And I was like, "Why are you talking like that?" I was like, you don't drink alcohol." And he was like, some paralizat, he said. He says, I'm paralyzed. And I says, why, what's going on? I said, you need to go to the hospital. He said he was in hospital. And I basically just jumped up and got onto the internet, booked a flight, and I was there. And I got there, I actually got there the following day. And I went in and he was in bed, and it was like he had had a stroke. He was 27, and I was there for 10 days, and within 10 days, I had seen him deteriorate, rapidly deteriorate. Um, every day, every day was something new. Um, he was in a wheelchair. His hand wouldn't move. Then the other day, another day was like his other hand wouldn't move. Then his leg wouldn't move. And then he used to eat green bananas. And he was in bed one day. I think it was maybe the fourth day I was there, and he had the pillows propped up in the bed, and I was standing at the window, and I had my camera, and I was taking pictures of him. And Adele's song, "When We Were Young," was in the background. It only just come out, and Nico had a banana in his hand, and he was like this, And I looked at him, I said, Nico, I says, can you see that banana? And he was like, yeah, 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 I can, yeah. I was like, okay. But I knew he didn't want to tell me things because he knew how much I worried about him. And I went to the doctor and I said, I think he's lost his sight. And she came in, they examined him, they did tests. His sight was gone. He
Right.
said he was just seeing um, shadows and he was seeing colours, but he couldn't see things clearly. Um,
So with Nico, I'm gathering Nico stopped taking his medication as well. Uh,
yeah,
That yeah.
he became depressed after. He became depressed after Alex died, and mental health in people with HIV, it's not really addressed.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, but he never told me because I'd ring him up and I'd say, how is your CD4? You know, because I'd know when he was going to have his appointments with the hospital, and he said, "Oh, everything is grand. I've got like CD4 is 900 and viral load is undetectable." And I'm like, "Oh, that's great." And but he was just he never told me that he stopped taking his meds. He
And what couldn't they? I mean, you know more about this than me, Stephen. You know, but couldn't they have put him back on the ARVs to try
well,
and
yeah. Well, the thing is, you can give a patient medication, but like Nick was over the age of 18,
right,
so he had his own choice. You can't force someone to take
right,
medication.
okay. So he didn't want to take them. He was adamant he didn't want to take them.
Well, that's from what I've heard. And then one of the nurses said to me, I never forget this when I went in to see him, and I was in like outside of the area where he was staying, in the hospital. I was really upset, and I was in this kind of little sitting room area, and she came in and she says, "I forgot kumana Louis," and that means like he did this with his own hands, and I was just.
Wow, that's so heartless.
And I was like, what do you mean? Like, I'm like, he's depressed. Why didn't you address this? And a whole discussion, I kind of like, as, and the same nurse, I have to say this, the same nurse, I didn't know her. She was a new nurse from what I'd known. Didn't know her when I worked there. But Nico said he hadn't opened his bowels for a few days because the bananas he was eating they would obviously, clog him up. But he said to me, he said, Tata, Dad, he said, Vraus kaka. He's like, I want to go to the toilet. And I says, no problem. This is about 2 o'clock in the morning. And I was in the hospital room with him. And I said to her, I said, can I have some lactulose, please? And she says, we don't have any. And I says, but there it is there on the trolley. I says, look, it was a large, you know, 500 mil of lactulose. And she went, Navem, which means like, we don't have any. Now she was on the chair in the nurse's station with her feet up at 2 o'clock in the morning with a blanket around her, like resting. And I went in and asked her for lactose. She said no. So and I couldn't take it, because she would have caused security and stuff like that. Like I knew everything that was in that room because I used to work in that room.
Why
And
wasn't she? Why wasn't she letting you have any?
because she was just an absolute bitch. So
Okay,
I reported her the next day, and one of the doctors, she says, "Oh, maybe it wasn't charted in Medicaid. Maybe it's not written up in his medication chart." And I said to the doctor, I says, giving lactulose to someone, you know, it's not going to kill someone. She could give that easily. We've done that as well here before. I says, you don't always remember. It says I've trained in this hospital. I learned all my nursing skills from you guys. So, the doctor kind of frowned, and she was like, she says, I'll sort it out. But 2 days later, anyway, he'd passed away. Um, it was, he was very critical. Like he was talking, but he was having, um, like a thing called myoclonic seizures. They were like mini kind of seizures. He'd be like this. And as a child, he used to always love somebody to rub his forehead and around his temples and the back of his neck. And I used to always do that. When he would get into a state of anxiety, I would always rub his head. I get him to lie down, and I just rub his head, and he'd be relaxed, and I talk to him, and just tell him how much I loved him. But yeah, um, he's gone, and I think he's gone, and like Nico was gone, and Nico was part of my life, but all the other kids were part of my life as well. And some of them, and a lot of them who who grew up with Nico, I'm still close with all of them, um, and we contact each other. We're on each other's social medias and stuff like that. Um, but they seen how it really affected me, um,
Mm.
and how his death affected me. Um,
Well, I can understand now, Stephen, that when I first met you, I wondered what was driving you to do what you do. Because your
yeah,
whole life evolves around helping others, whether it be at your work or whether it be in your activism. And when you first told me your story, nearly a year ago now, because I had this strange Irishman contact me one day out of the blue asking to take my picture. And I thought, who is this
yeah,
weirdo? But it wasn't until you explained to me that, you're doing this project and you're taking people's pictures that are living with HIV and
yeah,
sharing their story and their journey. But when you explained to me everything that you've just explained on this podcast, I can
yeah.
see now what drives you to do what you do. And I just want to thank you as someone who is living with HIV. Thank you for everything that you do. Because if it wasn't for people like you, the world would be a very, very dark place. And it's because of people like you that care, you give your time, you're not looking for anything out of it, you just want to help people. And I'm so glad our paths have crossed, because my diagnosis has introduced me to you, and I feel very privileged to know you. I really do. I think
Likewise.
you're an amazing. I think you're an amazing guy, and to do everything that you do. Every time I ring you, you're always busy. You're always doing something, and it's always evolved around helping others. And you're a blessing to so many people. You really are.
Oh, well, I'm just me, and I just do what I have to do. But, it's like, um, HIV is kind of like, it is like the forefront of my life. Like, I don't live with HIV, but it's like I live around it.
Show me your
And
t-shirt as well. Show the camera your t-shirt. I love that t-shirt. I've
so
got to get
it,
one of them.
so I'm, yeah, I always bring, well, when if I'm speaking to people, as a nurse, I'll always try and find out what they know about HIV, and try and give them a bit of education, because I don't think there's enough education there for people with
No, even
HIV.
even even amongst medical professionals,
Yeah,
there's still stigma there. I think I
yeah,
told you once when I went to the dentist, not long after I was diagnosed with HIV, I had to go for a checkup. I had a filling that had come out in my mouth, so I needed to go to the dentist. And I had to fill out this form. Have I got any medical conditions? And it was the first time. I wasn't open about my diagnosis then, so this was the first time I had to disclose that I had HIV. And I just had this. I'm sat in the waiting room filling this form out, and I thought, do I put it down or don't I put it down? And I just had this fear grip me, and in the end, I put it down on the form, and I handed it to the lady at reception, and she was looking at it, and she obviously saw the part that says I'm HIV positive, and her eyes just looked up at me, looked down at the paper, and she looked at me again, and yeah, I just thought, what's she thinking? Because I was getting
Yeah.
she looked shocked. I don't know if she's encountered this before on a form, but she looked shocked. So when it became my turn to go and get my filling done, I had to go upstairs. Downstairs was the area for where they do the teeth cleaning. Upstairs was where they do the fillings and extractions and things like that. So I went upstairs, and the dentist, he was brilliant. The actual dentist who did my filling, he was very interested in HIV, and I was talking to him about U equals U. But I had to go downstairs to book my teeth cleaning. So when I came, I had to come back 2 weeks later to have the actual teeth cleaned. When I came for the teeth cleaning and they saw on my form that I was HIV positive, it was like they were dressed to go on a NASA space shuttle. They were covered from head to toe. Not one piece of flesh was exposed.
Mm.
Double gloved, a big white paper suit on, masks. And I just laughed. I thought, is this? I can't believe what I'm seeing. The dentist upstairs only had a pair of gloves on. That was it. He had no facial mask. He had goggles on when he was doing the filling.
Yeah.
He was fine. But when I went downstairs for the teeth cleaning, they were covered from head to toe. And I thought, is
It's
this normal for teeth
no,
cleaning? It can't
no,
be.
no, it's
So
not.
yeah, I walked out. I laughed at the time, but I walked out of there, and the more it was on my mind for the rest of the afternoon,
Yeah.
and it kind of makes you feel dirty.
No.
There's something wrong with you. But I mean, we're talking nearly 3 years ago now. I don't feel that way anymore. But
We had the nurses in the hazmat suits and the big masks on in Romania in the 90s with the kids. They were like, and you I would eat popcorn from the kids' bowls and stuff like that. And they'd say, don't eat there. And they used to have these corn snacks called pouffoulettes. And the kids would say, do you want one? And I'd say, yeah, or I'd have a sweet or something like that. And they'd be like, don't eat anything from there. I was like, why? They were like, you're going to get AIDS from that. And I was like, what? You can't get AIDS or you can't get HIV from food. Like,
mm,
but this was I know like what you're saying, like, and through the documentary that I've been doing and the amount of people I've met so far, a lot of the people have said they've been stigmatized so badly by um people, staff that work in the dental field,
mm-hmm,
and a lot of the stigmatization from is coming from healthcare staff, like some nurses, which is, it drives me crazy to hear that, and just yeah, dental staff and some dentists, like, they'd put you at the end of the list or stuff, and different excuses, but it's like we need to challenge the stigma,
yeah,
you know.
because
Um,
I did a post not long ago, and I know it probably some people didn't like it, but I put living with HIV is easy. And it is, and
yeah,
what I mean by that is the virus. Living with a virus is easy. It's the stigma that
mm,
is the difficult part to live with. What people think of you when they know you've got HIV, and I'm obviously very vocal about it now. Everybody knows that I've got HIV. But living with a virus, what I'm trying to get across is living with HIV now today is it's easy. I take one tablet a day. I've got my pills here, Biktarvy, one little pink pill every day. It's all the bullshit that comes along with it that is
yeah,
the difficult part. Ignorance, and
yeah.
that's what drives me to do what I do now. Is to try and break down that stigma and educate people. And
Well, that's we're part of. When I met you and I seen how active you were in your activism and how brutally honest you are about your HIV status, and you don't give a shit like about like who
No.
knows or who doesn't know, like, and I love that about you. But be, when I started this documentary and I spoke to three different people, three different individuals, and they were all connected to a group, but they didn't tell me at the time. But one of the guys, Mario, I went to Palermo, and he sat down with me and he says, "You're an activist," and I was like, "What do you mean, me?" I was like, "What kind of an activist?" He's like, "You're an activist for HIV," and I was like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, look what you're doing," and
Mm.
I was like, "Okay." And he's like, "So you need to be part of our organization, this organization." And I was like, "What organization?" And then he said about EATG, European AIDS Treatment Group, and I was like, "Okay," and I was like, "Send me the link and I'll have a look at it." And then I filled out the membership and then got accepted into this organization, and then I just kind of shared it with you. So and then you eventually filled out your application form, and now you're part of it as well now. So we're a group of activists a group of people that are advocating for people who are living with HIV or being affected by HIV, and you know, it's a very strong group in Europe, and everyone knows EATG. Everyone in the HIV field world knows about EATG.
It really
Uh,
has. I know it sounds crazy, but I know it's not the same for everyone. But for me, HIV has been a real blessing in disguise. You know, I know in the beginning when I was first diagnosed, you go through all the normal emotions of receiving a diagnosis like that, fear being the main one. But it's introduced me to people like you. I've got so many new friends through it, and it's given me a purpose as well,
mm,
along with my work in the addiction world as a support worker. This is something I'm really passionate about.
mm,
Um, Spreading awareness and hopefully changing people's views on HIV, and
mm.
and that's what you're doing. And I can see it in you. You know, you're so passionate
It's
about
because,
it.
but it's part of our lives now. Like, you know, it's like
Yeah,
something that's there.
absolutely.
We can't stop talking about. We can't. We have to share it. Like we feel compelled to kind of like to
And I
share
can't
this.
wait as well. Next month, April 18th, I get to see
Oh
you again
yeah,
because last time the first and only time that we've ever met up was last. I think it was last March, beginning of
yeah,
March,
yeah,
and like I said, I had this crazy Irishman contact me who wanted to take my picture
yeah.
and document my journey with HIV. So in the end, you convinced me that you weren't some crackpot,
No,
and you flew over from Dublin
Dublin.
to
Yeah.
Birmingham, England, and I picked you up. We came back to my house, had a chat for about half an hour to an hour. We went and took my picture up at a local churchyard, had some food together, and boom, you were back on the plane back to Ireland. 3 hours, I think, we spent together. So on the 18th of April, I'm going to be meeting you and two other activists.
Yeah,
But I'm really looking forward to hooking up with you again and spending the whole day with you this time. And
yeah.
I'm really looking forward to it. And yeah, it's going to be a
Oh, we
good
have a
day.
great time. We'll have a great time.
But Stephen, I want to thank you today for coming on my podcast with me,
No
and
bother.
I would love to have you on again because there's so much more to talk about. I
Yeah,
think we've only sort of scraped the surface today, but it gives people a general idea of who you are and what you do and why you do.
yeah.
And I want to thank you for sharing some very intimate things with us as well today. I know it's hard speaking about Nico, but I know he'll be looking down from heaven. Very proud of what you do, Stephen, because you're an amazing man, and I truly mean this. I'm blessed to know you.
I'm blessed to know you. Thank you. Thank you about that. Oh my God! Like every time we mention Nico, it's just like it just pulls on the heartstrings. I miss him terribly, but sure. Ah,
But what you're doing is amazing, Stephen, and just
thank
thanks so
you.
much for coming on.
No bother. Thank
All
you very
right, my
much.
friend. You take care, and I'll speak to you soon.
Talk to you later.
Bye bye.
Bye.